Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm your host today, Brendan Glasheen, back with Billy Ward and Sean Zerillo. That means it's time for Best Bets for this weekend's UFC card. UFC Fight Night heads to St. Louis, Missouri. If you're new to the program, we make our way through main event, fight of the night. We hit underdogs, props, and then a best bet. And that's the program. So let's get started here. We've got the main event featuring Derrick Lewis and Rodrigo Nascimento this coming weekend. Nascimento, the underdog on this card, plus 136 for the main event, and Derrick Lewis priced around minus 160. Sean Zerillo, your assessment of this matchup and how you'd like to bet it.
So handicapping all Derrick Lewis fights is kind of the same. You figure out what the percentage chance that Lewis knocks out his opponent is,
sure,
and then give all of the other win equity essentially to his opponent. Now, Nascimento is kind of a similar matchup stylistically in terms of his skill set as Lewis's last opponent, Jailton Almeida, who controlled Derrick Lewis for longer than we've ever seen him control. 21 of the 25 minutes in that fight didn't finish Derrick Lewis. It was one of the greatest defensive mount performances we've ever seen in UFC history because he spent basically 20 minutes mounted by his opponent and somehow did not get finished. But I think Jailton was just very worried about Lewis exploding up, getting the fight back to the feet, and then potentially landing the one knockout blow that he needs to finish any fight. He has the most knockouts in UFC history with 14. This will be his 12th main event or 5-round fight experience or appearance. So he has a lot of experience in these longer 5-round fights. Doesn't necessarily have the cardio for them. In fact, he only has one 4th-round knockout on his record. I believe one decision over the course of 5 rounds. But the last time we saw him get extended, really, aside from the Jailton fight, was against Mark Hunt, and he was basically done via body shots in the 4th round. And he's very vulnerable to the body and to the legs at this stage of his career. He's taken a lot of damage, but he still only needs one to finish his opponent. And the difference between Nascimento and Jailton Almeida, as I said, stylistically, they're very similar, but I don't know Nascimento's jiu-jitsu is as good. I don't think his wrestling is as good, and I don't think he is as naturally strong or as good of an athlete as Jailton Almeida. So he's slower. He's more hittable. He's going to be there for Derrick Lewis to touch. And I think Lewis is going to put his hands on him at some point. Can his shin take it? I'm not really sure. He was knocked out by Chris Daukaus, who does not hit nearly in the same stratosphere as Derrick Lewis. So I'm expecting Lewis to touch that shin at some point within the first few rounds. I like him to win by knockout in rounds 1, 2, or 3. You can get that at minus 105. You could also structure a bet with Lewis to win by knockout in rounds 1 or 2 at plus 125. And then in rounds 2 or 3 at plus 320, I would probably weight double to the round 1 or 2 as I would to the round 2 or 3. And you'll profit if it hits 1 or 3. You'll profit doubly or quadruply, essentially, if it hits in round 2. And that is how a lot of Derrick Lewis fights play out. His opponents stare at him for 5 minutes. They try to get the feeling of the range. And then eventually round 2 starts. They pick up the pace a little bit. And either they get clipped and get KO'd, or they find a way to get the fight to the mat and start to put damage on Derrick Lewis. So I like Lewis early. I probably like Nascimento late. He just hasn't been in a 5-round fight in his career. So I don't really know how it's going to play out, the dynamics, if this does end up extending. But I would expect somebody to finish this fight within the first 15 minutes. And I'll take Lewis at around even money to do so.
All right. 14 of his 18 wins, all by knockout. UFC record, Derrick Lewis. And despite the shakiness, I guess, of Nascimento, he is 4-1, Billy, per your luck ratings. Not enough information to find value on the line. So how would you like to go about this? Or is there a live angle that you'd like to share, possibly?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I'm going to preface all this with saying, if this weren't a main event and we didn't have to talk about it, I would absolutely not want to touch on this fight at all.
Okay.
And the problem is it's just really hard to handicap Derrick Lewis, partially because of the reasons Zerillo said, but also because his motivation and preparedness fluctuates so wildly from fight to fight, where sometimes he comes in really good shape, he's got a little baby abs going, he's clearly been training all the time, and sometimes he's just there to collect a paycheck. Either way, he's going to throw a few bombs, but whether the speed and the timing and the distance management, whether he's been training all of that, we really never actually know. And I think we're at the point now with Derrick Lewis where I don't think he considers himself or is all that interested in making a title run. That's not really why he's here. He puts on fun fights. He gets a big knockout every once in a while, gets extra $50K. That's more his vibe than trying to just be the best fighter in the world. And he's only won one of his last 5. And that fight was when his contract was expiring. And then he came out and got a big flying knee knockout, looked great. That was before the Almeida fight. He apparently signed a huge deal coming into that one. So my lean here is that we don't get the best Derrick Lewis. He's 39 now, never a guy who is super disciplined or all that interested in training very hard. Don't think that gets better now that he's making more money, been around longer, more wear and tear on the body, all those things. So if I had to bet this one pre-fight, I would lean Nascimento. It's not a strong feeling because if Derrick Lewis is 100%, he should absolutely starch him. I don't think he is. And then, yeah, Nascimento live, you kind of cover that either way because if Lewis is unprepared and his cardio isn't great, that obviously helps Nascimento. And even if both guys are at, their peak, I would imagine Nascimento has a little bit more staying power. He's carrying less weight. He's not swinging as hard. All those things help down the stretch. So personally, not betting it pre-fight. If I had to, would be Nascimento. Keep an eye on some live angles, but I'm excited to watch this one. I just don't think it's a great one to bet on.
Go to the welterweight. We've got Joaquin Buckley taking on. Let me see here. We got Nursulton Ruziboev is your fight of the night as far as the welterweight. What do we make of the betting line here, Zerillo, with Buckley, the favorite at -135, total rounds at 1.5? Where would you urge people to check this fight as far as a betting angle?
Yeah, I'm taking Buckley pre-fight, and Billy and I are on opposite sides here, but I also like Buckley live, and I like his late props as well to win in round 2 at about +600 and round 3 at about +800. He is the more experienced UFC fighter. We've seen Ruziboev come into the UFC knockout 2 opponents in the first round, and he has 10 consecutive round 1 finishes, but I do think he's a bit of a can crusher, and I do think he's a bit of a fraud. We will find out as he continues to move up the rankings, but I think Buckley is a big step up in competition, and if he's going to get fraud checked, I think Buckley would be the type of fighter to do it because he's well-rounded, he hits hard, he's going to be the quicker athlete here. Ruziboev is really big. He's 6'5". He cuts a lot of weight to make welterweight. He's also taking this fight on relatively short notice as well, so we'll see how that impacts him. And in his last fight against Castries Dumas, I bet on Dumas small just because I think the line blew out ridiculously wide, and he won via eye poke. I mean, there was an eye poke involved in the sequence. Maybe he wins the fight ultimately, but there was an illegal strike or an illegal move that led to the fight-ending sequence, and there was an illegal move in the Michel Pereira fight last week as well that was not overturned by the judges. They didn't even review the Dumas illegal poke. And then later on the same card, there was a fight that was overturned, I believe, due to illegal eye poke. So there was just some rules inconsistency. Dumas is not the best person, and I don't think there was extra motivation to maybe save him from a potential loss there. But Buckley's the hometown fighter in this matchup. He's going to have the crowd behind him. I think he has the speed advantage. I think he has the cardio advantage. And I also think, perhaps most importantly, he has the wrestling advantage and the grappling upside in this fight. You see a number of submission wins on Ruziboev's record. I think he has a legitimate submission skill set, but I do think Buckley is the better wrestler and can determine where the fight takes place. So Buckley down the stretch is my preferred pick in this fight. I think Ruziboev has a good round 1, front-loaded success, and then Buckley takes over. So I definitely want some pre-fight because I do think he can win the first round, but I expect to find a better price live on Buckley after round 1. And then, as I said, I like his late props round 2 and round 3 as well.
Billy, you're on the other side of this one.
I am. And, Sean makes good points. We truly don't know if Ruziboev is as good as he's looked so far. With that said, the fight was definitely going his way against Dumas anyway. That wasn't like, it wasn't that some guy was dominating and then got eye poked and turned around. I do like that as a society, though, we've just decided that if you do something awesome enough, the rules don't apply to you anymore in a UFC fight, which is cool. I appreciate that. That would have been so sad for Michel last week. Anyway, getting back to this one, there's a couple reasons I like Ruziboev here. They're both former middleweights. They both cut a ton of weight, which is interesting. I'm a little surprised that neither of them seem to have any struggle making weight. They both came in well under. The way Buckley's stand-up works is he usually gets to be the bigger, faster guy and wins that way with the striking. Ruziboev has a massive reach edge here. We've got the big cage because it's, in St. Louis. It's not in the Apex Center. If Ruziboev can keep his range a little bit and stay on the outside and land some of those big left hands, I think that's going to help him a lot here. I believe, Buckley is a southpaw. It's the opposite stance matchup, so big right hands for Ruziboev on the pull counters. I'm also not convinced that Buckley is the better grappler here. Ruziboev is training with Enzo Gracie Philly, which has all the grapplers around that size all trained together there, which is a huge benefit for Ruziboev. Also, just the classic Eastern European, former Soviet Republic grappling style that we've come to know and love in the UFC. I believe that will translate really well for him. With all that said, if you were giving me Buckley at plus money, I'd be on that side too. I think this is a very close fight, but getting the plus money on Ruziboev is enough for me. Just given the physical tools that he has, I think that will be the deciding factor here.
Okay, very good. So opposite sides of the spectrum, but some potential live angles as well there from Zerillo on Buckley after round one. What do we make of the card for underdogs here, gents? We'll start with Zerillo.
Well, Billy and I are going to go head to head on another fight here. And before we discuss that fight, I actually want to start off by asking Billy, what do you think about Alex Caceres this weekend? Because I struggle to handicap Sean Woodson fights. He's really long. He's really tall. He has a big reach advantage over all the fighters he faces, but he has no power in his punches. And he has a lot of volume. But I think Caceres has the grappling upside and could potentially get a rear naked choke via backpack. So I'm struggling to see like how Caceres wins the fight other than that RNC backpack, but do you have any interest in betting Alex Caceres at all? Because other than the fight we're going to discuss, he's the one potential underdog that really popped out to me.
I do. I've kind of started to lean that way after watching some tape. I'm torn here a little bit. There's two things. Alex Caceres has the classic traditional martial arts, kung fu, karate style. What works for those guys is when they have space and time to set up and do their spins and their lateral movement and all that stuff. Traditionally, though, against a taller fighter, you want to be in close. So it's creating this weird dynamic where Woodson has so much height and length that in theory he wants to be on the outside. But if you wait on the outside for Bruce Leroy to do Bruce Leroy stuff, that's typically not the way you want to fight him. Giga had much more success when he got in his face. That's traditionally how it goes. So I am torn on that. I kind of like the career development we've seen out of Caceres with the wrestling that you mentioned. Given the massive plus money, it's Caceres or bust for me here. Haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, but I'm definitely leaning that way. It's just the two things I look at with those traditional martial arts stylists are going in opposite directions here. So I guess when you're getting plus money on a torn decision like that, it's probably the smart bet, but I haven't been able to fully convince myself yet.
So the two underdogs that I am probably going to find a way to play, or at least one of them I will find a way to play, but the other is Carlos Diego Ferreira at plus 400. I just think the line is getting a little bit crazy here. This is a guy who's only lost to top-ranked lightweights. Didn't look great in his last fight against Michael Johnson, but I think there might be a chance to play CDF by submission if you can get nice odds. I haven't actually taken a look at the prop market for that fight, but I just think the line is blown out a little too crazy considering the career history that this guy has. And Rebecki is a great fighter, but he needs to counter grapple here and strike. If he decides to get in a grappling match with Carlos Diego Ferreira, he could absolutely get submitted and put himself in danger. So just something to watch out for in that fight. If there's a big favorite who I think potentially chokes this weekend, it could be Rebecki, just by nature of getting into a grappling match with a grappler and not using his grappling to stay on the feet and strike, which is how he wins that fight clean and covers his price tag. So keep an eye out on that one. The other matchup where I will have bets, Waldo Cortes Acosta at about plus 210. I want plus 200 or better against big boy Robelis Despaigne, the silver medalist in Taekwondo. Now, we don't know very much about Despaigne. He had his first MMA fight lasted about a round. His last 4 fights have all ended in 18 seconds or less. So think about all of the things that we don't know about Robelis Despaigne. He has good, powerful kicks, seemingly has powerful hands, but we don't know about his durability, his cardio, his heart, how his grappling looks when he's put on bottom, whether he's able to offensively grapple. This is a guy who's been training MMA for about a year and not training with one of the top gyms in Florida, training at, lesser known gym in Florida, not American Top Team, not Kill Cliff FC. So not training with the best partners necessarily. And my hot take for this fight is that Waldo Cortes Acosta is a better athlete. And he's not as big. Despaigne is a 6-inch reach advantage. He's taller. He's the longest reach in UFC history. But Cortes Acosta, former baseball player, and I just prefer his movement and quickness and footwork. And this fight's going to take place in the bigger cage in St. Louis, not on the smaller cage in the Apex, where Despaigne is just going to immediately be on top of you. Cortes Acosta really good at working on the outside of the cage, using that movement to pick apart opponents. And I think he's going to do his best to play Matador here and try to tire out Despaigne, who has very limited MMA experience. We've only seen Waldo lose in the UFC when he's been out grappled. He was taken down by Marcos Rogerio de Lima. That was the decision that he lost. Other than that, we've seen him very competitive in striking fights. And pretty durable to the head. I do think he's open to get hit. I think Despaigne will have opportunities to close the show. But if he doesn't, we have no idea what this guy looks like after a few minutes. So live bets absolutely on Cortes Acosta after round 1, maybe even after 3 minutes. Free fight plus 210 on the money line. And then also his round 2 prop at plus 950, his round 3 prop at plus 1600. Those are just crazy numbers considering Despaigne's never been out of round 1.
And I'm seeing Acosta right now. There is a plus 200, plus 205 out in the market right now.
Yeah, plus 200 or better. I'll take some small pre-fight. I'm going to wait, though. This line opened at about minus 160 for Despaigne. I believe Billy got in on the earlier side of this line. It steamed all the way up now to minus 250 or higher. And if you just look at the line graph for the fight, it looks like it might keep going up, especially at weigh-ins today when these two stand next to each other and you see the size advantage that Despaigne has. I think there's a chance it gets closer to minus 300. So I'm going to wait on Cortes Acosta, but I want plus 200 or better.
Okay. Billy, underdog in mind for you on this card for UFC Fight Night in St. Louis.
Yeah, I'm going to roll right through my underdog real quick and then into props as well, since my prop is in direct opposition to Sean. But
perfect.
Underdog, one of the underdogs I like. I actually think it's a good card for underdogs, broadly speaking. We've all been on a few here. I like Chase Hooper, Chase the Dream, plus 120. Love him at lightweight. He was just so tall and skinny and lanky at 145, which was great when he was just doing jiu-jitsu competitions. But then when guys could hit him or shove him against the fence, it didn't work as well. He's fighting Slava Claus, high volume striker, always in your face. Chase Hooper loves trip takedowns and clinch stuff. It makes it really easy to get those things when the guy's swarming you and getting right up in the pocket the whole time. Slava Claus has been taken down in all but one UFC fight. The only exception was Heizer Maheshate, who has never taken down anyone, nor even attempted it. So I think this one does hit the mats. Very binary fight where, while striking, Slava Claus should have a huge advantage. On the mat, it's Chase Hooper, who's an elite submission grappler in his own right. If we think it's going to hit the mat, you got to take Chase Hooper at plus money. But to the fight we really want to talk about, Big Boy versus Salsa Boy. Very good versus very bad nickname matchup. It's crazy, I think, to say that Waldo Cortes Acosta is the better athlete. When Despaigne was a silver medalist, WCA had like a 15 ERA in 2 appearances for rookie ball with the Reds before bouncing out of baseball and finding his way to MMA. So it's not like, huge athletic pedigree here. I do agree, though. I would not take Despaigne's money line as far as it's gotten. I put in my luck rating. I'm actively looking for an opportunity to fade him. I took Parisian by submission at like plus 2,000 just as a little sprinkle last time. He's going to get exposed here. As soon as he fights, there's kind of 2 heavyweight divisions. There's the real good guys, there's 7 or 8 of them. And then there's everyone else, which is just either big athletic guys who aren't that skilled or very skilled guys who are bad athletes or some combination of the two. I just don't think Cortes Acosta has the skill set to do it. He gets by on beating these other people by being the better striker and by being faster and, just being a generally better athlete. I don't think he has any of that against Despaigne. Obviously, now at this point, the money line's gone so far. If I had to pick a money line side, I would go with Zerillo. I might even arbitrage out of my position because I got Big Boy at minus 175, so I could lock in a profit there. Despaigne KO is minus 165. That should just be his money line. He's not going to win a decision. Outside of some crazy club and sub where Cortes Acosta taps while being hit or something, he's not going to win a submission. The discrepancy there is absolutely crazy to me. Probably doesn't have great cardio. Taekwondo fights are shorter and less taxing. We know he doesn't grapple at all. Why would it be this big of a gap? I don't know if books just haven't adjusted the knockout prop up as the money line has came up or what, but that feels like an obvious choice. And you could even do Despaigne KO at minus 165 and then Cortes Acosta's money line and arbitrage a profit that way too. So if you're playing Despaigne, got to be KO. Waldo Cortes Acosta, you could even do live, just wait like a minute, just make sure he doesn't get starched 30 seconds in and go that way too, and probably arbitrage both sides. So there's a lot of ways to play it, even if neither of us have convinced you, where you're fairly safe to make a profit either way.
Yeah, I think that the Despaigne KO and Cortes Acosta money line is actually a very interesting discrepancy in price. You got about a 50-cent arb there, and I really don't see Despaigne winning other than by knockout. And I wouldn't lay minus 160 personally, but given the discrepancy there, that is an interesting way of playing things. I don't like playing both sides of fights, really, and trying to take props on both sides or winning methods on both sides, but this one seems kind of binary that if Despaigne doesn't get the KO, I don't see how he wins. So very, very interesting and potentially funny fight as well. This might end via hilarious quick knockout or potentially see Despaigne like death gassing in round 2. And I really like the Cortes Acosta round 2 at plus 950 and round 3 at plus 1600. I think he should have a severe cardio edge over the final 10 minutes. He has good cardio for heavyweight.
He does. I agree with you on the cardio angle, but we might not have time for it to get to round 2. Like, it seems like Despaigne might, if he doesn't knock him out in the first minute, that might be when the gas comes. So that's why I like the live a little bit better if you're thinking along those lines, just because that way you can actually get it in. And I also agree with you. I almost never play both sides. I might here, just because I got such good CLV on the Despaigne play earlier, cancel that out with a little bit of profit on the arbitrage and then take the Despaigne KO at an even better price. Probably what I'll end up doing here. Obviously, that's not actionable if you didn't read my luck ratings and jump in early. So
yeah,
take that from the fourth.
Okay. Zerillo, how about you when it comes to props? We just got Billy's underdog, which transitioned well into his prop play.
Yeah, another underdog, Charles Johnson by decision here at plus 220, or I got plus 220 last night. I think it was plus 200 this morning. That's fine for me. Plus 200 or better. This fight is minus 225 to go to a decision. Johnson is the underdog, but he is the hometown fighter, and he's the more active striker with higher output in this matchup. Jake Hadley, European grappler or British grappler, those typically don't translate as well to the UFC, just stylistically. He will go for submission attempts. I don't think those are going to score as well with the judges as Johnson strikes. Johnson very good at scrambling. I think he will win the scrambling in this fight and ultimately pull out the scorecard. So Charles Johnson by decision, plus 200 or better. And then Esteban Ribovics, round 2 or round 3, plus 650 and plus 1500 respectively, going against Terrance McKinney, who's always a hot starter. McKinney wins a lot of fights in round 1, and then his cardio falls off of a cliff. We see it consistently. Sometimes he doesn't even make it out of round 1. He's done by the end of 5 minutes and he ends up getting finished. But he has been finished twice in round 2 in the UFC. I actually think there's a chance this fight makes it all the way to round 3, though, just because Ribovics is so calm in there. He's actually kind of content to lose round 1. I am betting Ribovics small pre-fight in the event that he wins the fight at the end of round 1. Projected his money line closer to minus 200. You can get some minus 160 out there. So I bet that's small, but I prefer his round 2 and round 3 props, and I'd prefer the live angle just because he's content to lose round 1. He's going to let McKinney take him down, probably get the back, but he'll stay calm there. He'll fight the hands, defend those submission attempts, survive to round 2, and then you're going to see a completely different mentality from him when that clock starts for round 2. So Esteban Ribovics, round 2 plus 650, round 3 plus 1500 on top of some money line and a live bet as well.
Ribovics, round 2, still plus 650. The round 3 numbers come down to 12-1.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just small. I would put 0.2 on the, again, like double your stake on the round 2 prop versus the round 3 prop. Sure. As I mentioned earlier with the Lewis fight. Just so you're weighted about the same in the event that either one of them hit, you would take home roughly the same profit.
Okay. Excellent. Let's wrap it with best bets or a final bet for the UFC Fight Night card. Zerillo, you're going to a money line side here.
Yeah, as the best bet, Trey Waters at minus 160, 7 years younger, 7 inches taller, 5-inch reach advantage here over Billy Goff, who largely has 1-2 UFC fights on durability and toughness. And Waters lost his only MMA bout by getting out grappled. That's not going to happen here. This is going to be a striker versus striker matchup where Waters has way more physical tools, huge, as I said, huge reach and height advantage, but also he really fights well using his length. He fights behind a long jab. There's a lot of fighters who have a big reach advantage and don't necessarily make the most of it. Trey Waters knows how to optimize his skill set and his height. And outside of getting KO'd by Goff, who I said just has like that dog in his heart, it's the meme that you see on Twitter all the time. That is Goff's fighting style. And beyond that, Waters seemingly has him covered in this matchup. So a lot of respect for Billy Goff. This could be a potential fight of the night. These two may slug it out, but I like Waters to take it home.
We'll have to see if you put together your own rendition of the meme after this one concludes on Saturday.
Hopefully not. I don't want to see that dog for Billy Goff.
That's true.
Saturday. I hope he's got, the teeny tiny chihuahua on Saturday night.
All right, and Billy, you've got two more for us. Two best bets.
Yeah, one also plays in with a prop I didn't get to yet. I like Tabatha Ricci's money line at -140 here. I just think she's fighting Tecia Torres or Tecia Pennington, depending on which sportsbook you're looking at. I think this would be about the line, or this would be about a fair line under normal circumstances. This is the first fight back for Tecia Pennington after giving birth to a child. And the stats on that for women is not great for obvious reasons. Like, it's hard to do. You're taking a long break off. Also, kind of getting older by fighter standards, so I don't like that long of a break. Once you get up there in age, that makes it a little bit harder. Let me check. She's 34, so not horrible, but a 34-year-old 115-pounder is like a 55-year-old heavyweight or something. So there's that angle. Yeah, and Tabatha Ricci, this would be about the line I would have her at if all things were normal and this was still prime Tecia Torres. Ricci's only lost since her debut. She took her debut up at 125 and fought Manon Fiorot on short notice, natural 115er. Only loss since then was a split decision, where Tecia Torres is, I don't know, about roughly 500 in the UFC, a little bit better than that. 9-6, long UFC career, but hasn't been as great lately. And then I also like Tabatha Ricci to finish this fight at +400. That's just really long odds for anyone to finish the fight, especially when they're somewhat favored. She has excellent submissions, excellent takedowns. She's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu and judo, so she has a way to get the fight to the mat and a way to finish when it's there. I think a little bit underrated power as well for Ricci. Got a couple knockout wins on her record. So there's that angle. Then I also like Mateusz Rebecki at -140. Mateusz Rebecki inside the distance at -140. Sean alluded to this a little bit earlier with one of his picks, but I do think Rebecki needs the power and needs the finish against Diego Ferreira. Another one of those where the discrepancy between that and his massive money line just don't make a lot of sense to me. So if you're going to take the Mateusz Rebecki side, almost certainly needs a finish here if we think he's going to struggle with the grappling on the ground of Diego Ferreira, which is not an unreasonable thought to have.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's also 8 years younger. I regularly discuss how fighters, especially, 175 pounds or 170 pounds or below, are underrated when they're 7 to 8 years younger. I talked about it with Trey Waters. But I mean, I absolutely agree. Like, he should finish the fight. He just needs the counter grapple. Like, just don't get sucked into a grappling fight with a guy who wants to grapple and is probably a better submission grappler than you. That's just like the approach I want to see him take, to believe that he has the fight IQ to potentially compete with higher level fighters. It's a dangerous fight. I think it's a much more dangerous fight than the money line indicates. I'm not necessarily sure if I'm taking a CDF. If I do, I'll probably take him by submission. But like, it's just like a spot where I don't want to see him grapple, to know that he has the fight IQ to compete at the highest levels. I had a question for you regarding Tabatha Ricci. So she's friends, training partners with Mackenzie Dern. They're not going to fight, but if they did fight, you would favor Ricci, right?
That's closer because Ricci wants to grapple. Dern really wants to grapple, but has no takedowns. So does Ricci then put herself in a bad situation? I think this latest version we've seen of Mackenzie Dern, where she's not looked great the last couple, would have me favoring Ricci, but it'd be close. It'd be a close fight. It'd be fun stylistically. I think Ricci just kind of out of force of habit would turn it into a grappling match, which might not work for her. If you could get decent plus money on either side, I'd probably take it, but
Yeah, the reason I ask is that was Torres's or Pennington's last fight, was against Mackenzie Dern 2 years ago. She lost by split. It was a close fight. Dern got the bat. So Torres, Pennington denied all of the takedown attempts. Dern doesn't have great takedowns, but Dern found the back for significant portions of that fight. She was also winning striking on the feet too. So I think it was very interesting that I probably consider Ricci a better striker than Dern. Maybe don't give her as high level finishing upside with her submission ability, but I kind of prefer her takedown game as well. And I just think she has better tools maybe against Torres. And we're seeing Torres coming back from a 2-year layoff, having a kid. Does kind of seem like Ricci or pass, also given the age discrepancy in this division. So yeah, I haven't really bet on Tabatha Ricci much. I know she gets a lot of love from the MMA betting community. She seems like a cool fighter. But yeah, I've been aligned, I guess, or I don't really have a strong opinion on her relative to the odds she's been given. And we'll see if that changes as she continues to move up the rankings. I don't know what her ceiling ultimately is. I don't know if she's a future champion, but it does seem like she keeps getting favored and getting a lot of betting support in these fights.
I could be wrong on this, but I think it might have been Mackenzie Dern's fight back from pregnancy when she fought Tecia Torres as well, or like 2 fights back. So when we've got one woman in that fight who was at a disadvantage because of it, now that shifts to the other one that also I think plays into that a little bit. I could be wrong. It's obviously it doesn't show on Tapology or whatever when that gap was. And Dern didn't take that long of a gap. Like I believe the story was she was feeding her daughter like backstage right before they called her name to go out there. So obviously that wasn't ideal for Dern, but Pennington doesn't have this situation going on. Still, obviously many months off of training, many months trying to get the body back, all those other things that make it difficult.
She also submitted Nina Nunes when Nina was coming back from her first fight after having a kid as well. So I don't know if the UFC like tries to give every women's fighter on the card at least one opponent coming back from having a kid, but there seems to be some sort of like trade-off going on there.
Well, if you do it, then you get one on the other end. It seems to be exactly the trade, right? If you take it when you're coming back, then
Dana White wants him to keep pumping out kids. You'll be rewarded. All right, gentlemen.
It's the future of the division, You're producing future UFC stars. So.
That is going to do it for our UFC betting preview. UFC Fight Night in St. Louis at the Enterprise Center. Prelims start at 4 Eastern, main card at 7 Eastern, available on ESPN, ESPN+. Thanks to Billy Ward and Sean Zerillo. You can find them both in the Action Network app. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app if you have not done so already. All right, that's it. Best of luck this weekend. We'll see you next time here for a UFC betting preview on the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Good luck.